I want to welcome my panel. Please, panelists, join me on stage. We have Valentina Aguana. She's an activist and assistant engineer and the project coordinator for Noticias sin Filtro. Welcome. Patrick Boehler is with us. He is the founder of Gazzetta, which is a media research lab which is aiming to build resilience against against authoritarian regimes. Welcome, Patrick. Chen Pokong, please join us on stage. He is a Chinese-American activist, author, political commentator, and also a very successful YouTuber. Welcome. We have with us Gypsy Guillén Kaiser. She is the Chief Global Affairs Officer at the Committee to Protect Journalists, CPJ. Welcome, please. Oh, sorry, Patrick. And completing our panel is Andreas Gebhard. He is the CEO and co-founder of publica, which is, I believe, the largest web summit here in Germany, right? Yeah. Welcome, Andreas. Okay. We've already lost some time, but we still want you to be part of the conversation. So what we're going to do now, we will show you a QR code, and we'll ask you to scan it, and then answer the question that we will be showing you in a moment, and later we will take a look at the results. So if we can have the QR code, please, for the question to the audience. We want active participation. Okay, hello, Liz. Can we have the code, please? Ah, there it is. Okay, so we want to know from you, how can we bridge the generational tech gap in fighting censorship? Please scan the QR code, type in your answer as we go along, and then we will read out some of those answers later on. All right, Andreas, I want to start with you. We've asked the audience that question, but is there a generational tech gap, or are we starting with the wrong assumption?
I think these are two questions. So if we want to answer the question on censorship, I think there is no gap. Because from my perspective, we need a fundamental change in using technology, and overall generations, we are not using the right tools at the moment to be free of the oppression of the big tech companies or of governments. So the answer is clearly no, because we have to fundamentally change to free software, open source software infrastructures. And I'm really glad to be here to talk a little bit about this perspective, because this is my background in my work. And also, we as publica, which is a big event, we always try to be a platform for people who are encouraging journalists and also tech people for freedom of speech and freedom of expression. So there is a fundamental need for all generations to change media behavior in these days, and so I'm glad to be with you, and we are facing all the same challenge. So it's a positive way here to look in the future. So be strong, and we will make it.
Thank you. Yeah, I like that positive attitude. We will make it. Because sometimes I feel like when we're looking at these digital walls that have been built, and we talk about authoritarian regimes, we just heard that 72% of the world population lives in an authoritarian regime. So Gypsy, tell us, how have the tactics of these authoritarians changed? What kind of walls are they building at the moment?
Thank you so much, Liz, and thank you for having us here. Look, I will say that more broadly, my organization, the Committee to Protect Journalists, has data showing that we are at a point in time where journalists are under attack like never before. There are record numbers of journalists in prison and killed. So that's the overall background. If we look specifically at autocratic regimes, which I want to say there are electoral democracies that are exercising autocracy. So we should be clear that this is not just the Chinas and the Belaruses of the world, but actually other places with autocratic tendencies, including the United States. A journalist's path to prison begins with smears. very often. And I think Carole was also an example of that in terms of a slap, where there's a smear campaign that happens. There is a real takedown of the journalists in order to to destroy their credibility, their trust. So there's a wall that's put up, not only in terms of accessing information freely and as the general public, but a wall between the journalists and the news organization and the audience. And that begins by smearing. We have seen in Guatemala, in other places, where the journalists will be smeared. In fact, right now we're watching a list of journalists in Guatemala who are being smeared on social media. These are very targeted campaigns. And what happens is it's an indicator that a legal case will be built against you. And so you need to determine whether you need to leave the country for your safety or whether you're prepared to defend yourself and potentially face prison. The other thing that's happening is internet shutdowns and mobile service shutdowns around political protest and elections, which we saw during the mega year of elections quite often. We've seen that recently in various places. I mean, we've seen it in Iran with the situation there with the bombing by Israel. Never mind the situation in Gaza, where there has been a total, there's been communications blackouts on a regular basis. But these techniques are just becoming much more often deployed, even if for short periods of time.
I want to move to Patrick now to also give him a chance.
Can I just very quickly say the two other things?
Briefly.
One is surveillance, including spyware and the misuse of cybercrime laws, and the other thing that's happening is the scaled-up practice. These are relatively new things. Scaled-up practice of social media reviews at borders for content that the authorities find objectionable. This is happening in the United States, where there are many, many foreign correspondents and freelancers who come in to do reporting. I'll stop there.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Gypsy. So you've given us a very comprehensive list. Patrick, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, because we are talking, in the title we say it's digital walls, but we've already found out that it's not about walls, it's not about keeping information out completely, but there's different, of course, strategies. Is there anything that you want to add to that list?
I think that's a very comprehensive list in terms of the targeting of people and like how unpleasant and how difficult it is to be a journalist. From an audience perspective, I think that there's a big challenge in the fact that they might not even know that this is happening, right? Everyone in most countries really is surrounded by an abundance of information. And when we think about censorship, we typically have this image of, the Cold War or like noise, and you finally hear the radio station. And that's not really the case right now, right? We are navigating a world where there's a lot of information, and this targeted silencing is what makes this so difficult right now to tackle. Mm-hmm.
Now, the good thing about this panel is that we're going to hear examples from two specific countries. Let me start with China, because, of course, when you talk about censorship and digital walls, China is the one country that is always cited. But Pokong, you told me that, of course, in China, it's not only about this great firewall of China that we keep talking about. The Chinese government is doing things to not only suppress press freedom in the country, but also in other countries, right?
Yes. We know China has the Great Wall, but now we have to redefine Great Wall. The Great Wall is a cyber wall, it's a digital wall. It's much more costly, much more big scale than the history Great Wall. And also Chinese people now use VPN to watch, true news, true information, just like East Germans, climb the Berlin Wall. That's the same meaning. So I want to say, Chinese government set up the digital wall as soon as the internet was born. So it's a long history, and that's the biggest digital war. And we, Chinese dissidents, as a former democracy movement leader, political prisoner, and dissidents, we have been fighting with this war. Also, same decades, same as long as the Chinese government set up. So because this is our continued democracy movement for our freedom of speech. Basically, Chinese government did not only one thing, they did three things. Number one, they defend, they are defensive. They use block the information, censor internet to protect their power, their dictatorship. Second, they are offensive. They attack. They form large-scale internet army to spread fake information everywhere, domestically and internationally, flood internet. And Chinese people has a saying said, if you read a Chinese newspaper, everything is fake except the date. And if you watch a Chinese television, everything is fake except the weather forecast. So the third thing, they not only do that, they export their so-called Chinese solution, China model, to other dictatorship countries, to Russia, to Belarus, to North Korea, to Iran, to Myanmar, to everywhere. So they want to set up a Beijing-centered, closed world to divide this world into two. So that's really a big challenge for this world. I said the Chinese government is not only defensive but offensive. It's a big challenge for the
So you
free
say there are
world.
three things. There's keeping free information away from the citizens, it's flooding the zone with disinformation, and then it's always also exporting technology to other states. Let's go to Venezuela. What is President Nicolás Maduro doing in your country?
What is it not doing? But what Mr. Chen just said, I think it's really important to understand that censorship is not only like the technological censorship regarding not being able to access certain websites like the Great Firewall of China, or in the case of Venezuela, all the independent news media system is completely blocked and it's not accessible for Venezuela. But that's not the only thing that is happening. The censorship doesn't stop there. It's the fact that you are creating your own narrative, and that's what you're selling on your official channels. Because of course, if citizens can't access any other kind of information, then you're selling this narrative of what is true, what is real, and what is your truth. And they're using, and that's what we've seen in the past few decades, it's not only official government channels, they're using social media from the same social media channels that we use. They are even using X, formerly Twitter. Even though Twitter is currently blocked in Venezuela, they still use Twitter for
They're still posting regularly.
on Twitter for their misinformation campaigns.
Yeah.
And they're using TikTok for the misinformation campaigns, even though TikTok have also been blocked in Venezuela several times. And this strategy we've seen in other places and in other authoritarian regimes. This is all what we were saying before. It's just the same network of authoritarian regimes copying each other. And it doesn't have to always be the same known suspects like China, Venezuela, Iran. We've seen this in El Salvador. We've seen this like in the smear campaigns in Guatemala, and we are seeing this now in the U.S. Again, censorship, and this is the main thing, has not only digital repercussions but real life repercussions. Like we're talking about people in jail, people that are completely being disappeared. Censorship in Venezuela and digital rights, what we want to try and convey, are also human rights, and this is something that we need to talk about, not only talking about China, Venezuela, but on a global scale.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So we're also, of course, not here to only talk about how large the problem is, but also talk about solutions. So let me just stay with you, because you have created, together with your team, an app, a newsreader app. Tell me what this app provides its users.
The app is called Noticias sin Filtro, and gracias, thank you, Liz, for talking about it. We think we need to find solutions that are a bit out of the box and go a little bit beyond of what we already know. Yes, we need to use VPN, or is there a tech gap for censorship? The reality is everyone is suffering from censorship. And I feel like I was born in a sweet spot because I'm a digital or internet native, but also I was able to play with the internet, which was when the internet was still young. But younger generations, a lot of them also don't know how to use a VPN. They only know how to consume news, like the infinite doom scrolling through social media apps.
So we assume media literacy among the younger ones, but that is not the case. Okay, so when I go to Noticias in Filtro, if I download it, what is it that I'm getting?
So the newsreader app, Noticias in Filtro, News Without Filters, is a newsreader app with an integrated VPN. The idea is that users can access independent media news in Venezuela without having that friction of downloading a VPN, turning on the VPN, and also they can find exactly what they're looking for, which is news without blocking all that noise and disinformation campaigns that we see in social media. You just get the raw news, and the most important thing is that when you access the app and the first thing you see are the breaking news, then you see the news sites that you really like or that you check a lot, and then just a chronological list of the news. And when you click on a news that you want to read, you get directly to the news media outlet. This is not a news aggregator that just takes over information from the news site and post it on an app. You're actually giving that news media article a visit. You're giving clicks, you're giving views, you're giving ad revenue, which is what they need, especially in a censored context where people aren't getting the same revenue that they were getting before the blocks.
Thank you. Pokong, let me turn to you. Because you've chosen a different path, you are on YouTube almost every day. You do live streams. Thousands of people tune in to listen to you comment on what is happening within the Chinese Communist Party. You have some insider information. What else are your viewers getting from you?
Now Chinese people more and more use VPN. So overseas Chinese people try to set up VPN for the Chinese people inside China to help them. Of course, the Chinese government, they also use their fake VPN to destroy our campaign. But on the other hand, from my way, I keep in touch with Chinese.
Oh.
I keep in touch with Chinese people directly, not only VPN. So
can we get a new mic, please?
At the early time, like 20 years ago or 25 years ago, I used an email group.
Maybe you can swap. Yeah.
Maybe CCP want to discontinue.
Maybe, yeah, who knows? But they can stop us. Okay, go on.
About 25 years ago, I have to use an email group to send an email to Chinese people. So that's that time way after.
But that is working. Like you send out just. Some people talk about high tech. I'm just going to write an email and reach my users that way.
We have to collect many email addresses, and we send it every day or every week. Then we have more social media like YouTube. Now I have like near 500,000 subscribers for my YouTube channel. So I do every day to tell Chinese people the truth, the real news, what's going on in China, what's going on in other countries, international. So even I come here, I never stop. 365 days, I never stop. I come here, I prepared 3 programs for today, tomorrow, and yesterday.
Wonderful. That's commitment.
They automatically go out. So that's very important. I set my, usually I do live show. I use like 20, every day I use like 20 to 25 minutes to tell Chinese people. More than half of them use VPN from China. They want to listen to me. I tell them the true news or what's a hot topic or what's going on inside China. Then I leave 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A. So I use this way to keep in touch with Chinese people, so what they have questions. And by the way, I also, not only YouTube, not only VPN, I have to daily keep in touch with the people in China, even in the party, even in the government. I want to know what's going on there. You want to know what's going on outside. So that's very important to keep your contact with your people. To help your people.
That's very good advice. All right, so you're one-man newsroom. Andreas, we have mentioned before, and there's a discussion going on over at the other museum about how, of course, we need financing for independent journalism, right? Many independent media outlets are going to be affected by the US pulling its funds. How is that going to affect independent journalism, and how do we overcome that?
To give an answer to that, we maybe have to take a look a little bit in the past. European, and I can talk about Germany, especially Germany, the government and all the institutions had spent billions and billions of euros into infrastructures owned by the Silicon Valley companies, and they enabled them to be in the role as not only gatekeepers, they are ruling the world now, as we heard it today. And so we have to turn that around and see the still 24% of democracy countries in the world. They have to change their procurement way, how to use technology, and they definitely have to start with public money, public code. Mm-hmm. So every line of software which is used by the public sector has to be free software and open source software, and we have to build an independent and also state-independent library of tools for also journalists. It's about how to organize the digital society in a free and open way, which is not possible at the moment, because we have not the infrastructure free available for the 75% countries in the world. They will step into the same problem we have in Germany and in Europe, that they will be addicted to Silicon Valley technology when they will maybe hopefully in the future be in a free society to use technology. So to finance independent and free journalism must be is something the governments and the people in the rich developed countries must force their government to spend the money into free and open solutions which are available around the globe, that you are not stuck into Google technology also. And so we need a free and open library for everybody, and this is possible.
Thank you very much, Andreas. So you've made a strong case for the technology that we use. You're making case for open source technology. Let's see what journalists can do to overcome these walls, and then also how journalism needs to change and adapt. Maybe Gypsy, you want to go first, talk about the journalists and their role.
I actually think that one basic thing that journalists must do is take their own security into their own hands. And I know that sounds like it's their responsibility. There is a structural responsibility, and states need to deliver that protection and that freedom. However, the fact of the matter is, safety begins at home. And so news organizations, individual journalists, and whether they're freelancers or not, need to be able to make those risk assessments, have the support to actually be trained in their own digital security, and that is going to help provide a core protection for their ability to report. We provide this kind of training. We do it tailored, depending on the needs, and many other organizations do this as well. There is often sort of an allergy to this activity, which we understand, but we've seen even in I think for us a big example was the whole election year. We conducted very many trainings in India, for example, ahead of elections. We provided VPNs in Venezuela when there was unrest before the elections, and in the United States we had over 700 journalists prior to the elections trying to get this training, with digital security being a big part of that. Never mind after the election, we've had record numbers of journalists seeking that kind of training. So take it into your own hands. There is power still that's within your reach, and I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. By the way, Reporters Without Borders also have a booth somewhere outside, and they offer to screen your phone to see if there is any surveillance technology installed there. So you can go check that out. Patrick, what about journalists in the newsroom? How do media companies need to change?
Just one thought, also building on what you just said, and then how journalism should change. I think newsrooms or the media organizations that still exist have not only a
You
responsibility...
need to move the mic, I think, a bit closer
Better
to...
now?
Yeah, perfect.
Not only a responsibility toward the journalists to save them, to protect them, but also towards audiences. We are so used to capturing audience data at high level, and that requires a lot of data gathering in terms of data that we gather from audiences, in addition to the advertising space that gathers also a lot of data on audiences. So there's a whole lot of data you can get on anyone really in the world, and we need to really start thinking about how do we really need that data to prove that we're successful, or are there other ways of showing that we're successful or not? And then the other way I would say in terms of how journalism should change is, I'll give you an example of a news organization that was operating in North Korea for many years, and they assumed that these North Korean audiences were listening to these broadcasts because they wanted to hear the latest information about Kim Jong-il at the time and now Kim Jong-un. And when they were able to interview a fisherman who left the country, they found out that people were actually tuning in for the weather forecast. So to you say, like, the weather forecast is right. Actually, because it turned out that the South Korean weather forecast is way better than the North Korean one. And I think that's a lot of inspiration there in terms of, for us, if we want to be able to reach people in autocracies, we better be relevant to them. And a lot more thinking needs to go into relevance.
Relevance, all right. Now, I want us to take a quick look at how institutions, multilateral organizations can also play a role. We had the EU commissioner here, we had the representative from the state government. Is there a possibility of really putting pressure on the Venezuelan government, on the Chinese government? Because we keep hearing that in statements, in news articles, in speeches, at summits, but we're not really seeing any change. So do you have trust that the EU, for example, has the power to bring change in Venezuela?
I think multilateral connections are important. Governments do care. The Venezuelan regime does care about what is happening in the UN, what happens in the EU, and we need to keep putting pressure. It doesn't mean that one day to another, and then the regime is going to be gone because the UN doesn't want them. That's not how it works. But I think if we look at history, we created these institutions for a reason. So yes, we need to keep putting pressure, but also we need to find new ways to support our objectives of bringing democracy to these authoritarian regimes. And I think one way to do it is by funding civil society organization, is by funding independent journalism. So that's a way that the European Union can work to bring democracy to Venezuela, for example. And that's what we need to keep doing, fund things to bring democracy, like Noticias in Filtro is a way, but bringing VPNs, training independent media into cybersecurity, and the pressure needs to be stronger than what it is right now. We need to keep pressuring from all sides and think about what can the European Union get from having a free Venezuela or a free Nicaragua or a free Cuba.
Pokong, what about the Chinese government? Do you think that it is being intimidated by international pressure at all? Because we're even seeing that the tech companies, for example, which are very powerful, they have succumbed to this censorship. They are banned, and it looks like they have, well, it's okay for them. So who is going to change things in China, like from outside? Where should the pressure come from?
When China rises as a second superpower, now the Chinese government is really, they don't care, pressure. I believe Western government and many democratic government did a lot to give them pressure or persuasion. But it's hard to convince Chinese government or persuade them or touch them. However, I think Western government or Western people community can do at least one thing. We can stop the tech giant or social media giant to compromise with the Chinese authoritarian regime. Like, there occasionally we heard news like Apple or, Google even, X, Twitter, meaning, tech giant, they were compromised with Chinese government to meet their requirement. For example, myself, I have a Twitter account. When nearly go to followers about 200,000, but suddenly, when Twitter turned to be X, when Elon Musk take over Twitter, my account was suspended. By those reason, I sent multiple appeal, but they have a simple answer, just a violation. But there's no concrete explanation which part I violate. So it's stopped on February 16, 2023. I cannot use, Twitter. So I think the Western people must understand Chinese government not only refuse democracy, they also threaten, democracy. They not only defend themselves, they also, offend other countries. So if we don't stop the compromising just for profit, for proper reason, one day, Western may lose more and more, front line. So I think when your topic is breaking the barriers and build up bridges, right? I think the free world face a unison. We unite like from values, from ethics to technology, because it's not only internet, sensation is not only technical problem. It's not only technology problem. It's a moral and a political one. So all this, influenced not only China, influenced all over the world.
All right, so I'm looking at the clock. We're going to do one final round of just recommendations, a specific recommendation, call to action for one specific stakeholder. Patrick, I'm looking at you, so you'll have to start. What is the one thing that journalists can do, politicians can do, the EU can do for us to really be able to overcome these digital walls?
It's one recommendation I would say to any politicians here, and especially people.
They will watch the tape later.
Okay.
We'll send it to them.
Which is, I think, one of the great things that have happened in the internet freedom space over the last few years, and Noticias and Filtro is an example of it, is shifting the burden of censorship circumvention from the user to the publisher. And that has happened because there is an active ecosystem of activists, technologists, journalists who are working together and brainstorming and developing technology and testing globally, and they're comparing notes across autocracies, just like autocrats are comparing notes across autocracies. And a lot of that is the risk of going away because US funding of such efforts have basically disappeared or almost disappeared. And so there is a real need, there's a huge opportunity here in terms of the creativity of the space, but there's also a real need for this because Europe has been free riding to a large extent American efforts, and I worry we're feeling the cost of this very soon if we don't act.
Thank you. Gypsy.
Fully second that. Look, I think that we need to acknowledge the fact that what's happening, and the US does play a big role in this, is not just enabling censorship, but also creating the space for a takeover of the truth. And that's really, really important because once that gap is created and filled with something else that manipulates information, that has a different understanding and hijacks the notion of free expression, for example, that needs to be met with something else. And so I would say that for us, it's really important that European countries and that the EU as such understand that in terms of the global defense of media freedom, they are the front line. And the investments that they make and the choices in terms of protecting and promoting are going to count more than ever. We have an administration in the United States whose president owns a company that is now, while the government is defunding public media, and while a journalist who was arrested while live streaming, Mario Guevara, an immigrant journalist, has had everything thrown at him and is sitting in prison right now, awaiting to be freed on bail, which is being disregarded. While that's happening, the Truth Social company is beta testing international live streaming. So that needs to be met, and it needs to be met with decisive policy making. There are tools that the EU has, and the Democracy Shield and the DSA and so on and so forth. These things need to be financed, they need to be implemented, and it needs to happen quickly and decisively.
Yeah. Thank you. Andreas.
On top of this, the times are good to convince as many people as possible to bring this funding on the table, because that's in the best way defense of our societies. So if the countries are investing in military goods, this is for our defense and security a core thing. So we have to force the governments to bring money out of these boxes into defending the freedom of the internet, and we have to overcome, and this is the second point, to overcome this European or global South narration. We have only one digital society, which is globally, and I think we have to use this dark times to more see what unites us globally in a free digital society, and this is advice to everybody around the world.
Thank you very much. Valentina, I see you agree.
I think I agree totally with what Andrea said, also what Gypsy, that the European Union is at the forefront of defending democratic values. And I also think that we need to bring technologists into the conversation, because right now there is a separation between tech people and media and journalists, and this has to end. We need to bring people in from all forefronts, and technology people need to be involved in the conversation, because this is also a technological conversation. This is a tech discussion. And I think when we talk about censorship, we now need to shift a focus, as Patrick said. Now it has to be anti-censorship first, or censorship resistant by design. And I think open source, funding open source projects and funding projects that fight this censorship on a technological level is something that the European Union needs to do. So again, talking to technologists to tackle this battle is something that we have to do. We can be on two different sides, because we are all trying to go to the same destination, which is democracy.
Absolutely. But we have already started building bridges here on this panel. You see, we have a good mix of technologists and journalists, which is wonderful. Pokong, you get the final word.
Final word, Qing dynasty is the last imperial dynasty of China in the modern history. The rulers of Qing dynasty have a famous saying. They said, use the barbarians' strength to control barbarians. But they did not do that successful. However, the Red dynasty did successfully. Red dynasty is a communist regime. They did it successfully. What I want to say is how the free world, the Western world, to avoid the CCP use our own technology. Sure, they were still use they invaded the intellectual property. That's their problem. But for us, how to avoid our technology to be used by CCP, by the dictatorship? Because finally, if they use our technology against our technology, because technology is for the civilization advance, but the Chinese government use reverse purpose to stop, to hinder the civilization process. So this is a competition not only about GDP, it's about not only about technology, it's about values. So I think that this is really the time for free world to hold our front line to defend our democracy. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And that was our panel. Thank you so much to my panelists. You have been fantastic. Thank you.